Chapter 766, Fate. At this time, Xinlei Duomo had already guessed Tang Xiu's identity. She was both surprised and glad, and yet, a complicated expression could be seen on her face. One of the very reasons she came to Mist Source Island was to find out the situation with the cultivators in this mysterious Far East country. It would be best if she could find news about the woman who had nurtured and educated her. "Do you know my identity, Monseigneur?" asked Xinlei Duomo. Still, vigilance was there on her face. How could I possibly not know the famous she-devil who is the second in command of the Mexican Reston Mafia, and also rumored of having both wits and strength? Regardless, I never thought that we would meet here on Mist Source Island. It seems that the number of people who cast their greedy eyes on the resources produced by China is quite a lot indeed. "Since you already know who I am, please tell me who you are, Monseigneur," said Xinlei Duomo coldly. "Tang Xiu," said Tang Xiu lightly. The answer did not satisfy Xinlei Duomo. Only a name had no significance to her. What she wanted to know was Tang Xiu's identity. Moreover, she could tell that this fellow should definitely not be here by accident. "Have you been scheming on me?" Tang Xiu let out a dry chuckle. He had indeed schemed her, but he naturally would not admit it since Miao Wenlei had long died while Miao Hengfu had just been killed, leaving no witness to tell the tale. Nonetheless, he felt a bit regretful inside since Miao Hengfu turned out to have no strong capital at all, as the fella had no martial arts grandmaster experts under him, and was unable to Reston Mafia any damage. Otherwise, achieving his plan to kill two birds with one stone would be easy. "I don't get what you mean, Xinlei Duomo. We were just passing this place by and unexpectedly saw such a good show. If anything, I want to ask you something. This is Chinese territory and you killed its citizens here. What gave you the courage to do so? These people are nothing but trash. How can they possibly kill my men near my own camp given their abilities? Do the Chinese people like to feign madness and play the fool?" Ring, ring, ring. Tang Xiu's communicator suddenly sounded. He accepted the call under her angry glare and then said, "What is it?" Half a minute later, his expression turned strange. After saying, "Oh," he hung up, then smilingly looked at Xinlei Duomo and said, "All right. I admit that I'm the one who caused this. But it was out of my good intentions, for your own good and for the sake of your Reston gang. You killed my men and you are saying it's for my own good?" Xinlei Duomo angrily yelled. "What fucking nonsense are you playing? If my guess is correct, you have yet to figure out what happened to the camp in that village where you were stationed, right? I don't think you have received news yet either about what happened to the foreign powers who just tasted a bitter experience last night. But I can tell you that I have helped you and also pulled your Reston gang from a grave situation, in exchange for some ordinary people's lives. In other words, I'm the benefactor who just saved your lives." What the hell happened? Xinlei Duomo was stunned. She was swayed by Tang Xiu's serious expression. This guy admitted that he was the one who schemed against me, but how come he turned into my savior all of a sudden? 6 of my men died, for fuck's sake. Are you just farting out nonsense? Or are you intentionally mocking my intelligence? Your Reston gang seems to have an appalling intelligence network, huh? Tang Xiu sneered. "I will tell you something, woman. The third world's largest dangerous organization, the Stygian Club, has just been attacked by dozens of foreign forces last night, and some of the weaker forces were nearly exterminated. On the other hand, the world's largest organization, the Pyramid, retaliated against the Stygian Club, turning the situation messier. The other 2 forces that were camping in the same village as you suffered great losses. By picking up your Reston gang and making you leave that place temporarily, doesn't it mean you avoided the attack?" "What? The Stygian Club?" Xinlei Duomo's expression enormously changed, with dread filling her eyes. As a cultivator herself, she knew some facts unbeknownst to ordinary people. Regardless, how would the Stygian Club dare to pull such a motion? If my guess is correct, All the foreign forces in the entire Mist Source Island have begun to join hands in secret. The Stygian Club has too big an ambition, but they just stirred up the hornet's nest this time. What will be following next is a life and death battle between all those forces with the Stygian Club. Given the fact I pulled your Reston gang out of this chaotic mess, do you think my statement is wrong? Despite having a feeling that Tang Xiu's logic was lame and distorted some facts, she had no words to refute it. But if what he said was really true, then it seemed that she was really fortunate. After all, the Stygian Club was a dreadful influence and power, far beyond what her Reston Mafia could contend with. No. Accurately saying, even 100 Reston syndicates could do nothing to the Stygian Club. I have indeed not yet heard anything about this, Mr. Tang. Xinlei Duomo took a deep breath and slowly said. We are not enemies, and I don't have any intention of becoming enemies with cultivators from China either. After this, I also hope that we won't be enemies in the future. Well, making friends is better than making enemies, and I give you my word that we won't be enemies if you are willing to take the Reston gang and leave Mist Source Island, said Tang Xiu with a smile. I don't see why would the Reston people leaving Mist Source Island to have anything to do with you, Mr. Tang? Xinlei Duomo frowned. Can you officially represent the Chinese government? Tang Xiu straightly took out the green book and crisply said, It's unfortunate for you, but I can indeed represent the Chinese authority. I have this thing that gives the rights to do so. Personally coming here with my men was exactly to solve the problems here. I am telling you now that we will regard all foreign forces on Mist Source Island hostile if they keep staying here. Xinlei Duomo's eyes turned cold, but she instantly restrained her aura and solemnly looked at Tang Xiu's face, before she finally slowly said, Answer me a question. I'll leave Mist Source Island if your answer satisfies me. Do ask. Tang Xiu could see that she was unwilling, but did not dare to be his enemy. Despite being the representative of the Chinese authorities here, you are also a cultivator, so you know about the situation with the cultivators in China, right? Asked Xinlei Duomo. What I want to ask you is about someone who is also a cultivator. Who is it? Tang Xiu was astounded. I'm not particularly clear about her situation, Xinlei Duomo frowned. I only know that she is called Yan. She was like in her 20s 2 decades ago, so she should be around 40+ years old now. A woman named Yan in age around 40+ years old? Sorry, I have never heard of this person. Tang Xiu shook his head. There was a disappointed look in Xinlei Duomo's eyes as she replied with a bitter tone. Then I can only look for other cultivators in China to ask around since you don't know her. I'll be frank with you. She's the one who nurtured and imparted me a cultivation technique in the past, but I lost track about her many years ago. I indeed have never heard about the person you mentioned, but I also know little about cultivators in China. Tang Xiu slightly nodded. Many cultivators choose to stay hidden, concealing their identities or becoming hermits, secluding themselves in famed mountains and large rivers. It's always difficult to know of their existence unless they are willing to reveal themselves. Xinlei Duomo did not want to spend more time facing Tang Xiu. Now that she could not get any lead about the one she wanted to find out, she immediately cupped her fists and said, If so, then I'll take my leave. Tang Xiu did not stop her and only looked at her back as she departed. Just as he prepared to call out to Yishir-san and Zidane to leave the place, Zidane suddenly spoke to him in a toned-down voice, Boss, you forgot someone. Huh? Who? Tang Xiu wondered. She's the founder of the Everlasting Feast Hall, the previous big boss, said Zidane. Yen? Tang Xiu was stunned, and then his expression suddenly changed. My little disciple looked to be in her 20s more than 2 decades ago, while there's also a Yen in her name. Is there really a connection between them? Catch up with her and call her back. Tang Xiu straightly sat cross-legged and took out a pen and paper from his interspatial ring, preparing to paint Gu Yan's face. As though recalling something, he took out his mobile, opened the album gallery and picked her picture. A minute later, a vigilant Zhanglei Duomo had returned and stood in front of him. Is there something else you want? She was indeed wary of Tang Xiu, but not afraid of him. It was clear for her that she wouldn't be a match for Tang Xiu, but he would not be able to prevent her from running away either. Tang Xiu handed over his mobile and lightly said, "Take a look at this photo, is this the woman you're looking for?" Zhanglei Duomo took the mobile with a confused expression. When her eyes fell on the photo, her pupils shrank and her whole body shivered. Yes, it's her. Her voice trembled. That face was vividly stored itself inside her mind and carved deep inside her heart. At that time, she was so peerlessly beautiful and unparalleled, looking so cool and elegant at the same. She never knew what holiness meant prior to meeting her, but finally realized what it meant the very moment she first saw her. Tang Xiu touched his nose and secretly forced out a smile inside. He knew that Gu Yan had traveled all over the globe, but it never occurred to him that she would also leave such a legacy in Mexico. Why are you looking for her? After the silence for a while, Tang Xiu asked slowly. Reluctantly taking back her eyes from the photo, Zhanglei Duomo said with uncontrollable excitement, "She's my benefactor, my kind teacher, and also my half-mother. Back then, I made a mistake in front of her and shouldn't have killed that bad man, so she went away and forbade me to come to China. But I really miss her." Tang Xiu stared blankly for a moment after hearing her story. He could guess what concerned Gu Yan back then. She would never shut Zhanglei Duomo out only because she committed murder, as she herself was someone from the immortal world. Who in that realm did not have their hands stained with blood? It was highly likely that the very cause was her body. Chapter 767, Joining Hands. Tang Xiu quietly observed Zhanglei Duomo. He could feel her fluctuating emotions and how she really missed Gu Yan. Putting her story bluntly, it could be said that the core experts of the Everlasting Feast were very fortunate, or at least much luckier than her, for they still had the Everlasting Feast Hall as their home and family, whereas she was like a lonely soul, a ghost, who had been wandering alone outside for many years. As his eyes fell on Zidane and Yi Shisan's faces, he found that their expression when they looked at her was much gentler than before. "Zhanglei, do you want to see Yan?" Zhanglei Duomo's body shook, and then she hastily asked, "Can I see her? Do you know her whereabouts?" "Of course I know her whereabouts," Tang Xiu nodded. "As for whether you can see her, that will depend on your performance." "What do you want me to do?" she asked quickly. "I may allow your resting gang to temporarily stay in Mist Source Island under one condition: obey my orders while you stay here. Of course, I can also guarantee your safety in Mist Source Island. I can make sure of your safety even from those two elephant organizations, the Pyramid and the Stygian Club." Zhanglei Duomo shot Tang Xiu a deep look. A contemptuous look gradually emerged in her eyes as she shook her head and said, "You don't know how horrifying these two huge organizations are. If I were you, there is no way I would dare to brag." Tang Xiu just grinned in response before he smilingly said, "There is a Chinese saying that one can be a frog sitting in the bottom of a well. You may know some secrets in this world, but what you know is nothing but superficial. I never like to boast, and you can see for yourself whether I can thoroughly protect you as long as you agree. Tell me, why should I trust you?" After a long time in hesitation, Zhanglei Duomo cautiously asked. "I don't think you have any other choices, regardless. You can only choose to trust me if you want to keep staying in Mist Source Island and see Yan. Besides, you can throw away your worry that I'll push you into my machinations, because you would be nothing but a corpse now, if I really wanted to kill you." As an intelligent individual, Zhanglei Duomo could see Tang Xiu's confident expression and fell silent. Then, she asked, "What exactly do you want me to do?" "I need your help. To completely eradicate the Stygian Club, the Pyramid, and the other forces, or drive them away from Mist Source Island," said Tang Xiu categorically. "When we're done solving the problem on this island, I'll take you to see Yan." Zhanglei Duomo's pupils shrunk. She suddenly realized that the young man named Tang Xiu before her was not as simple as she thought him to be. At the very least, there was not only him and his 2 men at present. After taking a deep breath, she asked, "One last question. It's about you and her. What is your relationship with her?" Yishur-san, who was standing at the side, was angered upon seeing her still not agreeing with Tang Xiu. He was finally unable to hold it after hearing her question and shouted in a heavy tone, "You ask too much, Xinlei. Boss has already valued you highly by answering your previous questions. Give your answer to the boss, now. Are you willing to work for him while in Mist Source Island or not?" Xinlei Duomo's brows wrinkled. "I'm warning you. This is your only chance to go home." Yishur-san waved his hand to interrupt her and shouted. "If you don't cherish it, you can continue living a lonely life wandering abroad. To live and die in loneliness. A chance, to return, of going back, home?" Xinlei Duomo shivered inside, as though she suddenly realized something. With a bit of inconceivable expression, she looked at Tang Xiu, then to Yishur-san and Zidane. Countless thoughts swirled inside her head before she finally steeled her heart, clenched her teeth and said, "I promise. But I'll back out and refuse if your request is too much. First thing you gotta do is to scatter your Reston members. I don't want them to be killed amidst the slaughter between the other armed forces. I want them to act as intelligence personnel to find out the movements of other forces on the island and to give me feedback in time. You have formidable strength, so you are to stay with me." Xinlei Duomo thought about it for a moment before she slowly nodded and said, "All right. I'll convey the instructions immediately." Tang Xiu stopped her and said, "Tell your men to behave and act dutifully. Don't do any evil things in Mist Source Island. This place is under Chinese authority and I'm responsible for solving the crisis here, so I don't want your men looking for trouble that will affect me." "Understood." Xinlei Duomo replied and flashed toward her subordinates in the distance. Zidane, who stood beside Tang Xiu, looked at him and spoke in a low voice. "Do you really want to take her into our everlasting feast hall? She has some history with Yen, after all." Tang Xiu sighed. "I'll consider it if her inner making is not bad. Let's just observe her first. Besides, we still have grave problems to deal with here on Mist Source Island. Those foreign forces are like starving jackals, fixedly setting their greedy eyes on the resources of this island in an attempt to threaten the Chinese government. We don't have much time left since I must also participate in the research of the cure of the darkening virus. So we must be swift and ruthless, be it our movements or actions." "So, what do we do next?" asked Zidane. "Now that Xinlei Duomo has killed Miao Hingfu, it can be said we have removed one of the hidden dangers already," said Tang Xiu. "The next thing we gotta do is deal with those foreign forces. Let them cut one another's throat till nearly dying. Only then will we move to clean up the mess left behind." Mixed Summit City, the northern suburbs. The Stygian Club had moved their camp here because the place was surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, and Keithmore also thought that the place was quite concealed. Those elementalists from the pyramid were as though having gone insane as they launched several strikes in succession, causing 2 members of the Dark Soul squad he personally recruited to suffer heavy losses. Even Basil and Ality were both subjected to severe injuries. Keithmore's eyes were chilling as his stare was fixated on the young man in front of him. "Yes, we've thoroughly investigated it. It was the pyramid's people who attacked all the other forces last night. They used the dead bodies of our men to frame and make us the scapegoat. And now those forces are joining hands. On the one hand is to keep a distance from the pyramid, and are also preparing to get rid of us, on the other hand. Don't tell me they don't know that this is the pyramid's machination?" Keithmore angrily shouted. "Nobody among them is a fool, for they are able to grab and hold power in their hands." The youth bitterly smiled and said, "And yet, they are still preparing to get rid of us, which means that they have always seen our presence here as a threat to them. And thus, despite knowing that this is a machination run by the pyramid, This incident actually gives them an opportunity to join forces in order to have a chance to contend with us. People with power are ambitious, to begin with, and what they always want is to obtain more resources and profits. Keithmore scowled and asked, "Then what about the pyramid's people?" The young man replied, "They are now only 30 kilometers away from us, stationed in the mountain to the east. We've already investigated them, they far outnumber us. Also, we found another thing during the investigation, that is, one of the pyramid's war elders, Bodit, is also here." "That ghoul demon war elder, Bodit?" Keithmore's eyes turned icy cold as intense killing intent burst out from his eyes. He had some friction with most of the pyramid's war elders, and this ghoul demon war elder Bodit was one he had a particular grudge with. "Arrange the blood formation with blood poison." Keithmore issued an order from the slit of his teeth. The youth's complexion changed and hastily said, "But sir, we will end up perishing together with them if we set up the blood formation." "Pa!" Keithmore slapped the youth and bellowed, "You damn idiot. We won't die with them. Go tell the others to get ready. Since they want to exterminate us, then we'll kill them first." "Yes." The youth looked frightened and quickly got up from the ground and ran out of the tent. Dust came. Tang Xiu led Zidane, Yishur-san, and Jinlei Duomo as they quietly appeared in the eastern side of Mixed Summit City. After scouting, they found that the forces of all involved parties were already stationed in this place. Whoosh! A ghostly figure silently appeared nearby. Jinlei Duomo pulled her long saber out instantly as a thick killing intent locked on the man in a flash. "Don't!" Tang Xiu immediately stopped her and looked at Jin Shi, who appeared lighting fast, and then asked, "How is the situation?" Jin Shi shot Jinlei Duomo a cold glance before he replied to Tang Xiu respectfully, "Boss, the pyramid is now stationed in the northwest direction of Mixed Summit City. They number up to 62 people from our investigation. Also, we've determined that the leader is called Wu Ji, the organization's intelligence war elder." "The pyramid's war elder, eh?" Tang Xiu nodded and sneered. "They really value Mist Source Island highly for such a bigwig to have appeared here." Jin Shi then said with solemnity, "It appears that not only the intelligence war elder is here, but also the ghoul demon war elder, Bodit. The attack launched at the Stygian Club was the work of Bodit and his men." "Got it." Tang Xiu replied, and then turned to look at Jinlei Duomo and plainly said, "It's just some people. Not worth for us to fuss over. Anyways, Jin Shi is my man, and the rest will come here later as well." Jinlei Duomo was somewhat taken aback inside. She did not expect Tang Xiu to have so many cultivators under him. More so that the guy who just arrived also had the strength that could not be underestimated. At this moment, Tho was becoming more curious about the number of Tang Xiu's men. Inferring from what he said, it was apparent that he should have more of them, no? 2 hours later, Jinlei Duomo looked at the 9 men in front of Tang Xiu and was greatly shocked. 9 experts. And all of them were cultivators. Being able to control such a formidable force was already dreadful. They could freely roam anywhere. A terrifying force that could occupy a very large territory with might. Chapter 768, On the Eve of the Battle. In the dense forest, Mo and Shui Gui were like ghosts in the dark night as they flashed lightning fast toward Tang Xiu's position. In just a short while, the duo arrived in front of Tang Xiu. "Oh." Shui Gui suddenly frowned. When he saw Jinlei Duomo standing beside Tang Xiu, a thick killing intent suddenly erupted from him as he released his flying sword in an instant. Tang Xiu's expression slightly changed and appeared in front of Jinlei Duomo like lightning and also released his flying sword to ward off Shui Gui's. As he paced back, he angrily shouted, "Stop it, Shui Gui." Shui Gui did not realize the meaning of Jinlei Duomo standing next to Tang Xiu a moment ago. As he saw his own boss blocking his attack, his expression suddenly changed and instantly took back his flying sword. Yet, His seething killing intent was still locked on Xinlei Duomo. "What's going on with you?" asked Tang Xiu with a frown.
Ha!
"Turns out to be Shuigui, eh?" Xinlei Duomo derided. "Little did I expect for your strength to greatly improve after our last encounter 7+ years ago. What's wrong? Do you still want to avenge your brother, Shuishi?" Whoosh. Other than Moao, the other 9 men instantly released their flying swords and glared at Xinlei Duomo with faces full of killing intent. This made Xinlei Duomo's face slightly pale, and she instantly took half a step back. Tang Xiu's brows tightened even more, and then asked in a deep tone, "Answer me, Shuigui." As loyal as Shuigui was to Tang Xiu, he hastily lowered his head upon sensing Tang Xiu's anger in his tone, and then replied, "I once had a brother. He was called Shuishi and also a core member of the Everlasting Feast Hall, or he used to be. About 7+ years ago, we carried out a mission abroad and encountered this woman. She didn't change much, so I can be 100% sure that this woman is really her. She killed my brother and severely injured me, causing me to be stranded on the cliff for several days. I almost died in a foreign country back then. I've done everything I can to find any leads about her over the years, but I never expected her to appear here." Tang Xiu turned to Xinlei Duomo and asked, "You killed his brother? Why?" "We were in different camps and worked for different employers," said Xinlei Duomo bluntly. "You and your brother resorted to all sorts of tricks and schemes and killed my employer in order to steal intelligence. I did kill Shuishi, but it would have been me who died instead if I didn't kill him. All that happened was caused by yourselves, while I was only fighting back." This. Although Shuigui knew that her argument was sound and reasonable, the one who died was, after all, his blood brother. Enmity and hatred had been buried deep inside his heart for so many years, and he just could not let it go like that. Tang Xiu had a headache, for he did not expect to encounter such a situation. Nonetheless, he was biased towards Xinlei's explanation, because like she said, each worked for a different employer in the past, and thus it was inevitable that they would prey on each other, to kill or be killed. Still, there was hatred. How should he deal with it? Tang Xiu took a deep breath, as he waved his hand and said, "Shuigui, the grudge between the both you shall be solved after the problems on Mist Source Island have been dealt with. I'll tell you ahead of time, Xinlei has something in common with you. She was also nurtured and taught by Yan in her childhood just like you. After I solve the problems here, take his matter back to Jingmen Island and by that time, you should ask Yan as for how to solve the grievances between the two of you." Having said that, his eyes swept over the rest and plainly said, "Take back your weapons. If you are thirsty for killing, kill those foreign forces first." Jin Shi and the others simultaneously took back their flying swords, while Shuigui hesitated before storing his flying sword back into his body. He did not dare to go against Tang Xiu's order but secretly decided that he would definitely make Xinlei Duomo pay the price after the Mist Source Island's problems were solved. Tang Xiu then looked at Moao and asked, "So, what information did you get over there?" Moao took out a map and respectfully said, "The Stygian Club has just moved their encampment. We have investigated and found that their people are currently setting up a very stray array. We already marked its location, it's the only path to enter the current Stygian Club's camp." Tang Xiu received the map and observed it for some time. Then he nodded and said, "The Stygian Club can become the third largest organization overseas, meaning that they absolutely have some unknown cards at hand. Our purpose this time is very simple. We'll make them devour each other, with the only caution that we must guard against being the pyramid's members. All right, let's go to the mountain and watch the tigers fight with each other." Mixed Summit City, at the northern suburbs. As Tang Xiu came with Moao and the others quietly, they took a detour via another direction to the Stygian Club's encampment northwest of the mountain. After looking around for a good location, Tang Xiu immediately set up a concealment array quietly. "Let's camp here and wait for those ambitious schemers to cut one another's throats." Boss, should we push the billows and waves in the dark? Asked Mo. Of course, adding fuel to the flame is a must, but I'll take on this job myself while you all will be staying here. Oh, do you still have vampire body parts? Mo took out battered wings from his interspatial ring and said, these ones are what I have left. That will be enough, Tang Xiu nodded with satisfaction. All right. You all stay here. With that said, he seemed to realize something as his eyes swept over from Shui Gui to Xinlei Duomo and coldly said, do keep my words in mind. You two will put down your grievances for the time being, and everything will be solved after we all return to Jingmen Island. I will severely punish anyone who dares to start a personal fight now. Understood. All right. Shui Gui and Xinlei Duomo exchanged glances and answered. In the forests, dozens of kilometers east of Mixed Summit City, dozens of tents were disorderly built. Many heavily armed burly men were now vigilantly scouting and patrolling the surroundings, whereas more than a dozen leaders of all parties gathered inside a certain tent, engaged in a heated quarrel with flushed faces. I suggest that we not rush to attack them. We must lay out the plan well first and make sure all members of the Stygian Club are unable to escape our barricade, even if they have wings. Only then shall we completely destroy all the divergent races under the Stygian Club, said a robust, strong black man. All intrigues and tricks are futile in the face of absolute power, for one blow is enough to finish them off. We have more than a dozen forces with tons of combat experts here. Those alien divergent races are very powerful indeed, but we have numbers on our side, hence they will never be able to escape. So I suggest to steamroll them at once, another white man shouted in a deep voice. I think we still have to wait, and it's best to wait for the Pyramid's people to act first. Else, once we and the Stygian Club's people suffer mutual heavy losses, the one who will finally profit from it will be those from the Pyramid. That's right. The Pyramid's people are eyeing the Stygian Club with hostility and hatred, so we must join forces with them to add more power. If by chance the Pyramid's people turn their back and point their weapon against us, unforeseen accidents are highly likely to happen. I don't think we should join them. The scene was chaotic. Each and every one of them wanted to decide the course according to their own ideas. For a while, the whole situation was in gridlock. A few kilometers away from them, Tang Xiu was like a ghost in the darkness as he silently approached the two armed foreign burly men. At a time when the two of them were unaware of the situation, his sharp dagger ripped their throats and claimed their souls directly. Then, he continued running around the surrounding and constantly hunted the security forces from all the foreign forces that patrolled the periphery. 12 men. After Tang Xiu felt that it was enough, he intentionally made some noises and threw out a dozen feathers around the dead bodies, and then straightly left. Rat-tat-tat. Blazing flame tongues burst out as howling bullets followed up. 7 men who were in guarding duty opened fire at the direction where Tang Xiu just left and hurriedly chased after him. Unfortunately, even though they were quite fast, the difference in their speed was stark as night and day. As they came near the 2 dead armed men, only then did they stop chasing. Feathers? One of the middle-aged men with a high status picked up the feathers and observed them. The killing intent in his expression turned more intense and he almost rushed to the camping area without hesitation. What happened? More than a dozen leaders of the various parties, who were previously inside the tent, rushed out as the burly black man asked in a loud shout. The middle-aged stout man came before the group and then showed a dozen feathers in his hand. Then he quickly said, "Those who were in guarding duty have just been sneakily ambushed. I just counted the number of casualties, 12 men in total. I found these feathers near our men's dead bodies. It should be vampire feathers. Fucking bastard. This has gone too far. Rampant and arrogant. Just kill them all. Avenge them." The ringleaders of more than a dozen parties had their complexion enormously changed and bellowed as they fell into a rage. They thought that the Stygian Club's people were now like rats, flustered and wouldn't dare to come out of their holes. Little did they expect that they would be so rampant and arrogant to mount a sneak attack and stealthily ambush them. Kill. They were unable to reach a united opinion before, but a consensus was now reached in just a few minutes. The decision was to wait until tomorrow morning, then they would start to take action to kill all members of the Stygian Club on Mist Source Island, no matter the cost. After Tang Xiu returned to the concealment array, he observed the situation of the Stygian Club with binoculars. Then, he sat on a blue stone as he looked at his men and asked, "If my guesstimate is correct, this alliance won't be a match to the Stygian Club, and I'm afraid that the Pyramid's people won't take action as long as the Stygian Club has yet to suffer heavy losses in the following battle. Any of you has a suggestion or solution as for how we can drag the Pyramid's people into the fray? I have a way to inflict heavy damage to the Stygian Club without involving the Pyramid's men from mixing in," said Jinlei Duomo all of a sudden. "Elaborate. How can you do that?" Tang Xiu's spirit aroused and he quickly asked. Chapter 769, Venomous Scheme. A cold glint flashed in Jinlei Duomo's eyes as she slowly spoke. "I carry a drug, a terrible laxative with me. As long as we can sneak and put this laxative into the meal of the Stygian Club's members, it will cause them to suffer abdominal pain and insane defecation. It will greatly impact the Stygian Club's men even if they want to go all out to fight back when both sides are engaged in the battle. Hence, it will inflict them with severe losses." "Laxative?" Tang Xiu asked with knitted brows. "Will this laxative have an effect on the divergent races?" "It's absolutely effective." Jinlei Duomo nodded and explained, "This laxative is so powerful that even I will also fall into the same predicament if I take it, let alone those divergent races. In fact, I once fought a marquee rank vampire a few years ago that ended up in my loss. To wipe away this disgrace, I first looked for a mysterious poison expert and asked him to prescribe this laxative. Then I used it on that marquee rank vampire, which nearly made him pull his intestines out. In the end, I was able to kill directly him even though my strength was pretty inferior to his." "That is indeed a good idea, but I'm afraid it will be easy for the divergent races to detect it if they smell that something's not right with their meals," commented Tang Xiu. "Not for my laxative," Jinlei Duomo proudly said. "It's because this laxative is colorless and tasteless. They will never notice it when mixed into their meals." Tang Xiu thought about it for a while before he nodded and said, "I'll go to the southeast side and find out when those dozens of parties are going to attack the Stygian Club. Jinlei, I need you to sneak into the Stygian Club's encampment, and immediately put the laxative in their meals once you receive the news from me." "Order received." "Got it." Mo and Jinlei Duomo answered at the same and left at a very fast speed. Early in the next morning, when a blazing red ball rising from the east, the colorful rays of sunlight filled half of the sky and illuminated Mist Source Island, as though it was covered with a gorgeous mantle. The total number of forces from more than a dozen parties amounted to more than 560 people as they started to rush over toward the direction of the Stygian Club's encampment, in an aggressive manner. At a close distance to the flock were more than 20 ace experts, who could no longer be seen as ordinary human experts anymore. They were responsible to clean up all the obstruction on the road and did it at a very fast speed, while also acting as vanguards to shield the large troops entering the canyon and then charge toward the inner valley. Half an hour ago, Jinlei Duomo had secretly put the laxative into the meals of Stygian Club's members. After half an hour brewing inside their stomachs, dozens of the Stygian Club's members felt a stomach ache and had symptoms of severe diarrhea. The close-quarter fights and the battle were on the verge of breaking out. The most powerful man of the Stygian Club here, Keith Moore, had also been caught in a great flurry by the sudden outbreak. Just as the nearly 600 men-strong alliance stormed over into the canyon, they straightly launched swift and fierce attacks after rushing through the array formation on the hillside in the northwest direction. With a face full of enthusiasm, Tang Xiu watched the slaughtering and killing unfolding below. What made him feel very interested was the fact that the Stygian club turned out to have many experts. Not only were there a lot of vampires, werewolves, and wingmen, but there was also other numerous demi-humans. And yet, they could only suppress their diarrhea while fighting back against the enemy attacks. The killings. It was a scene where blood continued to be shed along with painful screams. In another direction, the pyramid's intelligence war elder, Wu Jie, had been waiting for a long time along with dozens of the pyramid experts. Never did they expect that such a large-scale diarrhea outbreak would happen to the Stygian club's experts. Despite Wu Jie himself wanting both sides to clash as he reaped the profits as the third party, the scene still stimulated him nonetheless. Get ready. We are going to jump into the battle and fight at any time now. Wu Ji looked straight to Bodit, who stood next to him while stroking his beard and grinning. Bodit was frowning instead and slowly said, "This situation is a bit particular. It's kind of fishy, to be exact. More so if the one who gave the order to use laxatives on the Stygian club's members is not one of the Alliance forces. I suggest to acting rashly and wait for some time until the battles are settled before we move and join the fray." Wu Jie was called the Intelligence War Elder and was known for his wisdom. Thus, he nodded without hesitation and said, "We only need to surround the Stygian club's camp and its periphery and wait for both sides to suffer losses and then clean up the mess. Everyone, move. Do pay attention to the attack signal and immediately strike once you find any enemies." Time passed by slowly. The intense battle and killing lasted for half an hour, with both the Stygian club and the united forces of the dozen parties suffering grieving losses, including that burly black man who was hit by a werewolf and was now severely injured. It was under such a situation that the Alliance members began to feel fear and look for an opportunity to run away. Stop them. Activate the formation. Upon seeing that the enemies were gradually weakening, Keith Moore did not hesitate to issue the order. As 4 count-rank vampires acted, the array was activated, releasing the blood poison. Arg! Shrill screams came from the mouths of the coalition forces experts. It was then followed by unceasing shrill screams afterward. Break through the enemy lines. Kill them all. A Caucasian leader bellowed and instantly dashed in front of a count-rank vampire, but the latter killed him with only a blow, while several heavily armed big men around him met their tragic deaths by the blood poison. Life for life. In the coalition army, a young, thin and black youth's back was shredded by a werewolf's claws. The moment his blood guzzled out, he suddenly gouged his own eyes out with difficulty. While his blood was flowing out, he screamed out those words with a shrill voice before he fainted, as a nebulous jet-black smoke suddenly spread out from him and then formed a black fog twister that turned into a cyclone. The dead bodies on the ground and the pools of blood spilled on the ground were as though being summoned at this moment, quickly flowed toward him and eventually merged into the black fog cyclone. Boom. In just a few breaths, a black fog cyclone of tens of meters height was then formed. Suddenly, at the moment when the thin youth's body exploded, a mushroom-like cloud like that of a nuclear bomb explosion blasted out and instantly smashed several werewolves and vampires of the Stygian club into blood mists, whereas 7 or 8 people from the coalition forces were also killed in an instant. On the ground, the blood array was broken and the blood poison dispersed. The frenzied killings raged on. The ever-intensifying losses toward the Stygian club's members eventually forced them to retreat with sharp, shrill cries. Their number was originally 50-plus people, but only 20 of them retreated. The coalition forces of the various parties were even worse, as only 200 people survived from the nearly 600 men strong, while more than half of them were battered and injured. In the northwest direction, Tang Xiu stood on the edge of the concealment array while watching the miserable scene below. His mind was still like water. He was accustomed to seeing the scene of killings just like the one in front of him right now, and thus felt nothing at all. But Moa and the others, including the ruthless and merciless Shinlei Duomo, looked slightly pale. They were also ruthless people whose hands were stained with blood. However, the vast majority of their previous battles heavily relied on firearms. Far from the kind of close combat fights where flesh and blood flew in all directions and bodies were blown to pieces. "Are we going to move, boss?" Mo Ao shot a glance at Tang Xiu and asked in a toned-down voice. He was secretly taken aback upon seeing how calm and tranquil Tang Xiu was. Because he really could not figure him out in the end. Was it because Tang Xiu's heart too ruthless, or was it because what he had gone through? Not yet. Today's most important protagonist has not yet appeared. Tang Xiu shook his head and indifferently said. Let's just see what is going to unfold as of now. No rush and no worries for us. I'm sure the show is going to be more splendid once our protagonist enters the stage. Mo Ao looked at him and asked with hesitation, "You mean, the pyramid?" Saying it bluntly, the pyramid is the world's largest organization, while the Stygian Club is at best only an allied force. Tang Xiu chuckled. The pyramid is different, for it unites as a whole entity with remarkable wisdom and intelligence in how they operate, whether it is against their enemies or development. Just wait. I'm sure the intelligence war elder of the pyramid must be feeling grateful for the machinations we've set up for him. But why? Asked Mo Ao, confused. The sandpiper and the clam fought with each other, and he will be the fisherman who catches them both. Why wouldn't he feel grateful for us who have spent great effort and time to set it up for him? Mo Ao realized it instantly as he grinned and said, "Nope. I don't think to describe it as both parties fighting and the third party takes all the profits appropriate for this situation, boss. It's more perfect to describe it as the mantis stalks the cicada while unaware of the oriole behind them because there are hunters behind the yellow bird. And we will be the last winners, for we are those hunters." Tang Xiu could not help laughing and said, "There are so many winding ways to describe it." Oh. Well, the protagonist is finally appearing. Mo Ao and the rest's expressions moved and quickly set their visions into the distance. From the southeast direction, 50-plus figures flew toward the coalition forces lightning fast. Some of them were chasing the Stygian Club as they flew toward the direction of their retreat. Just as 5 vampires and 3 wingmen of the Stygian Club flew in the air and were about to retreat to the top of the mountain, a gunshot followed by a blasting bullet streaking up to the sky and blocking their retreat path. "Stay here." 3 old men possessing soaring auras led more than a dozen high-spirited elementalists up from the back of the mountain and unleashed their special abilities. Lightning crazily blitzed, cyclones emerged out of the blue, water dragons danced their claws aggressively, and pieces of sharp metals covered the sky. Flame. Burning flame as though fire burning a prairie blazed out crazily as the low and majestic voice sounded. Several wingmen were instantly shrouded in raging fire, while the vampires were almost barbecued by the flame and crazily fell down. Intelligence War Elder Wu Jia was holding a golden scepter as he stepped on the cloud of flames and swept away 2 count-rank vampires. It was like some random, casual blows, and yet it killed the 2 count-rank vampires directly. "You'll be damned, Wu Jia." Finally, Keith Moore's figure shot from the distance. His ear-splitting roar contained infinite rage within. A thin old man beside the Intelligence War Elder maniacally laughed. "I think it's you who will die, Keith. I didn't kill you in the past, but I will give nobody face today." Hurricane, Myriad's Decapitation. Chapter 770, Instant Kill. Despite there being no terrifying scenes that made the heaven and earth be torn asunder, the fight between genuine powerhouses still gave off an inexplicable feeling. The boundless and majestic momentum, the accumulation of killing intent contained within the flashing swords and saber rattling, accompanied by bloody foul winds and rains of blood. Even the everlasting feast hall's experts could not help but have a change in expression. What a show of power! Xinlei Duomo looked at the scene of the Intelligence War Elder Wu Ji, Keith Moore, and the others who praying each other midair in disbelief. She felt shocked like a tidal wave hitting her heart. She thought she was already strong enough, but never occurred to her that the gap between her and these powerhouses from the Stygian Club and Pyramid was like a chasm. Suddenly, her gaze moved from the battle between the two parties and fell on Tang Xiu's indifferent expression. After hesitating for a bit, she asked, "I know that you're much stronger than me, Mr. Tang. But how would you compare to these people? Who is stronger? I may not be their opponent if I fought them in a friendly match. But their chance of surviving against me is less than 1% if we really have to fight with our lives on the line," said Tang Xiu indifferently. The answer made Xinlei tremble inside. She did not think that Tang Xiu was boasting, because in the face of such a bloody and frenzied battle that they possibly had to act and fight at any time, hence bragging would only court his own death. Tang Xiu glanced at her before shifting back his eyes to the battle. The crazy battle in front drove away any ordinary human beings in the surroundings. Many people were not aware of that vampires and elementalists exist in the world and therefore did not have the slight thought to pull the trigger of their guns in the face of these horrifying monsters from legends. Huh? While watching, Tang Xiu's face suddenly changed. The battle mid-air was originally a few kilometers away. And even though the intelligence war elder Wu Ji and Bodut also suffered minor injuries, their strength was still very powerful, while Keith Moore and his several underlings were in a different situation as his other men were all killed other than Basil and Ality. What made Tang Xiu's expression change was that these three vampires, Keith Moore, Basil, and Ality fought desperately but were still forced to retreat back by Wu Jia and Bodut, and were now heading toward his direction. With his far-sightedness, Tang Xiu could clearly predict where these three would land on the ground. Once Wu Jia and Bodut caught up with them and fought in the vicinity around them, the concealment array would be affected and they would be exposed. "Oh, give me a mask," said Tang Xiu in a deep voice. Mo Og quickly took out 2 bronze masks from his interspatial ring and handed one to Tang Xiu, as he also put on the other one. Jing and the others also grabbed their bronze masks in succession and quickly put them on. Only Xinlei Duomo looked at them with a puzzled expression, wanting to speak but hesitating. "Give her one," said Tang Xiu. "Got it." Mu Og glared at her first, but finally took one out and gave it to her. Tempest. Bodut, who was wearing a long blue robe and holding a red crystal rod, frenziedly waved the crystal rod and kept sending wind blades while pursuing them. The whole world in front of him was then inundated by hundreds of wind blades that fiercely hacked toward the remaining shadows of Keith Moore's group of 3. As the trees on the mountainside were devastated by the wind blades, and at the moment a towering big tree loudly fell to the ground, Keith Moore, Basil, and Ality had already landed on a spot less than 100 meters away from the concealment array where Tang Xiu and the others were hiding. "Target those 2 vampires who escaped previously." Tang Xiu instantly released his long sword right when the other party was getting closer. His figure instantly disappeared and appeared in front of Keith Moore. His violent sword was like tearing apart the space barrier as all the energies from all directions swarmed, as a dreadful killing strike was then launched. "What?" Keith Moore's expression greatly changed, for he never expected that there would be an ambush in front. What scared him the most was that the ambusher was just popped out of thin air, and there were no signs and traces of his presence before. Whoosh! As a sword light swept away, Keith Moore's wings were instantly cut off. A miserable shrieking scream sounded from him, but 2 sword lights came following out of the blue, piercing his abdomen and waist, and then struck into Basil and Ality's chests. The 2 vampires, who had been injured, were caught off guard and hurriedly avoided the strike hitting their hearts, leaving 2 horrible bleeding wounds on their chests. At this moment, right as Basil and Ality felt they just avoided a disaster and mustered all their strength to get away and escape from this place, 8 flying swords came shooting at them. Pooh! Pooh! The 8 flying swords impaled their bodies, causing their blood to burst out. In desperation, Basil and Ality fell down and crashed on the ground, causing thorough destruction of their core nucleus and completely dying. Tang Xiu ignored Basil and Ality. He appeared right beside Keith Moore and conjured an art that created a horrible sight of tempestuous lightning that enveloped Keith Moore. In an instant, while the long sword that hovered around Tang Xiu flashed and pierced Keith Moore's head. Bam! At the moment when Keith Moore was hit hard, Tang Xiu sent a heavy punch to his chest. The powerful force did not shatter his core nucleus but still sent him flying upside down. Cut! The longsword hacked away from Keith Moore's left shoulder through his heart and even cleaved his right in half. Everything happened in just 4+ seconds. Tang Xiu and the others appeared from the concealment array and only took 4+ seconds to finish the assassination, and the very formidable Keith Moore, who had a very high status in the Stygian Club, was killed along with his 2 men, Basil and Aladi. Who are you? Wu Jia came down from midair with blazing flames hovering around him. After opening his arms to prevent the pyramid's experts who came behind him to continue forward, he stared fixedly at Tang Xiu and his men. Tang Xiu sneered at him. After Mo and the rest converged with him, he coldly stared back at Wu Jia and said, "You're the one causing trouble in the territory of China, my country. And yet, you still ask who we are?" You, who is hailed as the intelligence war elder of the pyramid, turned out to be this idiot. China? Daoist cultivators? Wu Jia's body trembled and he instantly raided the golden scepter in his hand, saying, "You just killed the Stygian Club's people and they have nothing to do with us, the pyramid. An adage says that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. How about joining forces to eradicate all the Stygian Club's experts on Mist Source Island, and then become friends? Maybe we can be friends if you drag your pyramid's people back and leave Mist Source Island," Tang Xiu sneered. "But if you keep coveting the resources of my Mist Source Island and invading our territory, then you'll be our enemies." Wu Jia frowned. "Your meaning is, you represent the Chinese authority?" "We are people under the Chinese authority and naturally can represent the official stance of the Chinese government," said Tang Xiu coldly. "This Mist Source Island is in China's sovereignty and is not open to outsiders. You have come here intruding our territory, thus I give you a chance to leave. Keep staying here, then your fate will not be better than these Stygian Club's people." Intense killing intent burst out from Bodut's eyes. When Wu Jia had yet to reply, he had already stormed over toward Tang Xiu. "You court death." Mo and the others rushed out, unleashing their flying swords to fight against Bodut. Tang Xiu threw out 24 array discs. His hands conjured a rune in the air and the coruscating stars array was laid out in just a few breaths and instantly activated. Wu Jia's complexion drastically changed and flew backward for 100 meters in a flurry, and was luckily able to escape right at the moment the array was activated. But Bodut appeared directly inside the coruscating stars array. "Retreat. I'll kill him." Tang Xiu's figure shifted and appeared in the array's core as he then loudly shouted. In a flash, Mo and the others clearly heard the voice transmission from Tang Xiu commanding them to leave the coruscating stars array. As they left the array, Tang Xiu controlled the big array and unleashed the 4 divine beasts, Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Red Phoenix, and Black Tortoise to appear out of the blue and encircle Bodut from 4 directions. "Kill him." With Tang Xiu's command, the 4 divine beasts unleashed their magical powers and launched unceasing fierce attacks on Bodut. The man himself had a very formidable strength and was a level stronger than Tang Xiu in his peak state. However, Tang Xiu had laid the coruscating stars array according to the 24 principles of the constellation chart and, added with his deep knowledge in arrays, it made the coruscating stars array become more powerful. Only the coruscating stars array itself had brought a huge crisis to Bodut, more so that it was under Tang Xiu's control, making Bodut become surrounded by danger from all sides and almost be killed by the 4 divine beasts several times. From a spot over 100 meters away, Wu Jia looked at the empty space with an expression of fright, for he was able to sense the mighty energy that was continuously being drawn from all directions and forming the special space. But he couldn't see the scene inside since he stood outside. There was no Tang Xiu nor Bodut to be seen there. But Wu Jia perfectly realized that Tang Xiu must have used some method to trap Bodut inside, and it was more likely that Bodut was facing an enormous threat at this moment. Wu Jia thought for a while and then suddenly called out, "How about chatting first, little boy?" Inside the coruscating stars array, Tang Xiu, who heard that, had his face suddenly turn cold. In almost a flash, the primal chaos force inside his body rushed out, causing the four divine beasts to nearly double in size in just a few breaths. The coruscating stars array's power multiplied. Arg! Bodut evaded the sweeping tail of the Azure Dragon, but his back was scratched by the white tiger's sharp claws, and badly bleeding. However, his crisis had not yet passed as the red phoenix sprayed out billowing flames to burn his body, while the black tortoise slammed his chest and broke his breastbone. Die. Tang Xiu's figure disappeared in the center of the array in a flash. His longsword turned into a streak of light that pierced through Bodut's chest, while his figure appeared in front of him in order to prevent him from escaping. Then, his fist bombarded his forehead. Blood splattered in all directions. It was a one-hit kill.